Hello. Whether you're settling into bed, winding down from the day, or simply letting your mind rest for a while, take a moment to slow down. This is Sleepless Veteran, military history for quiet minds. Here, we don't dramatize. We remember. We walk through history together, slowly and carefully. Tonight, we're going to Vietnam, to a war fought differently than any before it. A war where helicopters became central to almost every operation, where young men, most barely out of high school, sat in open doors 100 feet above the jungle, strapped in with harnesses, manning M60 machine guns, completely exposed to everything below. This is the story of door gunners, the men who fought from what many considered the most dangerous position in the entire war. Not the pilots protected by the aircraft frame, not the infantry with at least the possibility of cover, but the soldiers sitting in the open cargo doors, visible to anyone who looked up, within range of anything that could shoot. We're not here to glorify their service or to make war seem like adventure. Just to understand what they experienced, what it meant to strap into that harness day after day, to fly mission after mission, knowing the statistics, knowing that eventually the fire from below would find you. So find a comfortable position, let your breathing settle. What follows is a story about altitude and exposure, about routine and fear, about young men doing a job that the numbers said would kill them, about the 12 months that felt infinite, about the sound of rotor blades that some still hear decades later. Stay calm, stay present. Let's walk through this history together. Now, let's go to Vietnam, to the helicopters, to the open doors, to the men who sat there. The sound is distinctive. Not like any other aircraft. A deep, rhythmic beat. Whop, whop, whop. The rotor blades of a Huey helicopter cutting through air. To some, it became known as the sound of freedom. The sound that meant extraction was coming. That meant you might survive. To others, it meant something different. The sound that brought death from above. That announced American presence. That drew fire. The UH-1 Iroquois entered service in the early 1960s. Bell Helicopter designed it as a utility transport. The name Iroquois never stuck. Everyone called it the Huey. The nickname came from the early designation HU. Even after the designation changed to UH-1, the name remained. Huey. Simple, direct, the way soldiers name things. Vietnam became the first war where helicopters served as more than peripheral support. They became central to how operations were conducted. The terrain made them necessary. Dense jungle, few roads, mountains, rice paddies, rivers. Ground movement was slow, vulnerable to ambush. Helicopters provided mobility that terrain denied. They inserted troops into landing zones, extracted them after operations, delivered supplies to remote fire bases, evacuated wounded, provided fire support, conducted reconnaissance. The list of missions grew as commanders recognized the helicopter's versatility. By the peak of American involvement, helicopters were involved in nearly every operation. The Huey became the symbol of the war itself. Over 7,000 Hueys served in Vietnam. The number reflects how central they became. That many aircraft required enormous support. Pilots, crew chiefs, maintenance personnel, and door gunners. The position that emerged not from planning, but from necessity. Early transport helicopters flew unarmed. The first missions revealed the problem immediately. Helicopters were vulnerable to ground fire. Slow compared to fixed-wing aircraft. Low altitude, predictable flight paths to and from landing zones. The enemy quickly learned to position along these routes, to fire at the helicopters, to damage them, to kill crews. Solutions were improvised. Machine guns were mounted in the cargo doors. The doors themselves were large, designed to allow rapid loading and unloading of troops and cargo. They provided wide openings, good fields of fire. Crew members were assigned to man these guns. The door gunner position was born. No formal doctrine existed initially. No specific training program. The position developed organically. Each unit figured out what worked. Mount the gun here. Use this type of ammunition. Fire in these situations. The knowledge spread through experience, through trial and error, through casualties that taught hard lessons. The M60 machine gun became the standard weapon. A belt-fed design. Gas-operated. Chambered in 7.62mm NATO ammunition. The same round used in American rifles, though with a heavier bullet and more powder. The M60 could fire approximately 5 to 150 rounds per minute. Effective range reached 700 to 1,000 meters. The weapon was proven, reliable enough, light enough at 23 pounds that one person could handle it. The mounting systems varied. Early mounts were simple. Pintle mounts bolted to the floor or door frame. The gun could traverse left and right, elevate and depress. Later systems used bungee cords. This allowed the gun to move more freely, reduced the strain on the gunner, improved tracking of targets. Some gunners customized their mounts, added features, tried to improve what they were issued. The position itself was inherently exposed. The door gunner stood or sat in the open door, the cargo door that was designed for loading troops. That design created the firing position, but it also meant complete exposure. No armor, no protection, just open air on one side and the minimal aircraft structure on the other. A harness system connected the gunner to the aircraft. Strong points inside the helicopter. Straps around the torso. This was the gunner's belt. The only thing preventing a fall if you lost your footing. If the helicopter maneuvered hard, if you were hit. The belt allowed movement. Let you lean out to acquire targets, to fire at different angles, but it was just straps and clips, not armor, not protection from fire, just prevention from falling. Some door gunners wore body armor, ceramic plates and vests, flak jackets. Others chose not to. The armor was hot, restrictive, made movement harder. In the heat and humidity of Vietnam, the trade-off between protection and comfort was constant. Different men made different choices. Some wore armor every flight, others never did. Most were somewhere in between. The assignment to door gunner came in various ways. Some men volunteered, wanted to fly rather than walk, preferred the helicopter to the infantry. Others were simply assigned. You're on the crew. You're manning the gun. The military needed door gunners, needed them constantly. The position had high turnover, for reasons that would become clear. Young men received the assignment, 18 years old, 19, 20. Recent arrivals in Vietnam. Some had training before deploying. Formal schools where they learned the M60, learned basic aerial gunnery. Others received minimal instruction. Here's the weapon. Here's how it works. Don't fall out. The real training happened in Vietnam, on the actual missions, learning by doing, learning by watching others, learning by surviving or not. The door gunner heard about the position's reputation quickly. Other soldiers told stories about casualty rates, about how dangerous it was, about door gunners who didn't make it. The statistics were vague, but ominous. 5-minute life expectancy was a number some quoted. Whether accurate or not, it reflected perception. Door gunners were at extreme risk. Everyone knew it, but the military needed door gunners. The helicopters flew daily, multiple missions per aircraft. Each mission required the guns manned, required someone sitting in those doors. The position had to be filled regardless of risk, regardless of reputation. The war continued. The helicopters flew. The doors needed gunners. So young men strapped into the harness, took position at the M60, looked out at jungle or rice paddies or mountains 100 feet below, felt the wind from the open door, heard the rotor blades, the turbine, prepared for their first mission, for what came next, for whatever awaited in the landing zones ahead. The sound of the rotors continued, the distinctive beat, the rhythm that would become so familiar, that would be heard on hundreds of missions if you survived that long. The sound that some men would still hear decades later, in their sleep, in their memories. The sound of the Huey, the sound of Vietnam, the sound that meant you were a door gunner. The flight to Vietnam was long, commercial airliner, hours over the Pacific, then descent. The first view of the country from altitude, green, so much green. Jungle covering mountains, rice paddies in the lowlands, rivers. The landscape looked almost peaceful from that height. It wasn't. Landing at one of the main bases, Bien Hoa, Da Nang, Tan Son Nhut. The heat hit immediately upon leaving the aircraft. Thick heat, humid, different from anything most young Americans had experienced. The air felt heavy, hard to breathe. Sweat began immediately. Processing took days. In-country orientation, basic information about Vietnam, the enemy, the terrain, safety briefings, equipment issue, then assignment to units. For those designated as helicopter crew members, orders to specific aviation units, transport companies, assault helicopter companies, air cavalry units. The assignment determined where you'd serve, what you'd do, who you'd fly with. Arrival at the unit meant meeting the crew. Helicopter crews were small, 4 men typically, 2 pilots, the aircraft commander and the pilot, the crew chief, and the door gunner or gunners. Some aircraft carried 2 door gunners, 1 on each side. Others carried 1 gunner, and the crew chief operated the other gun. Arrangements varied by unit and mission. The crew chief was senior, responsible for the aircraft, its maintenance, its readiness, a specialist or sergeant, usually, someone with experience, someone who knew the Huey intimately. The crew chief would show the new door gunner the aircraft, explain systems, show where things were, how things worked. The pilots were warrant officers or commissioned officers, younger than expected often. The aircraft commander might be 22, 23, flying helicopters in combat, making life and death decisions. The responsibility given to young men was remarkable, but that was Vietnam. Youth and responsibility combined out of necessity. The other door gunner, if there was one, provided the most immediate guidance. Showed how he had his gun set up, his ammunition arranged, his position organized, explained what to expect, what to watch for, the informal training that meant more than any official briefing. One door gunner to another. Experience passed directly. The first sight of the Huey with its doors open and guns mounted was significant. This would be your position, your workspace, your world during missions. The open door, the M60 on its mount, ammunition cans, the floor marked with scratches and stains, the wear of use. This was where you'd stand or sit, where you'd fight. Strapping into the gunner's belt for the first time felt strange. The harness around the torso, the clips to strong points, the knowledge that this was all that prevented falling. Testing it, leaning out slightly, feeling the belt catch, the trust required, trust in the equipment, trust that it would hold. The M60 was familiar if you'd had training, the same weapon system, but seeing it, mounted in the door, understanding you'd fire it while the helicopter moved, while it maneuvered at targets below. That was different from range training, different from anything practiced stateside. Loading the weapon, linking belts of ammunition, the 7.62mm rounds. Every 5th round a tracer, the ratio was standard. 4 bore rounds, 1 tracer. The tracers let you see where fire was going, let you adjust, but they also showed the enemy where fire was coming from. A trade-off, like everything else. The first mission brief came within days, sometimes within hours. The war didn't pause for new arrivals to acclimate. Missions flew daily. The new door gunner was needed immediately. The brief covered the basics: destination, purpose, landing zone coordinates, expected enemy situation, call signs, frequencies, information delivered quickly, expected to be absorbed, expected to be remembered. The walk to the aircraft before the first mission felt different from training. This was real. The helicopter would fly into potentially hostile areas. People would try to kill you. You might have to kill them. The abstract became concrete. Training became mission. Practice became combat. Pre-flight checks. The crew chief inspecting the aircraft. The pilots running through their checklist. The door gunner checking the weapon. Charging the bolt, checking feed, ensuring ammunition was ready, the routine that would become automatic. That wasn't automatic yet. Strapping in, the harness secure, the weapon ready. Sitting or standing in the door, the rotor blades beginning to turn. Slowly at first, then faster. The distinctive sound building, the turbine spooling up, the helicopter coming alive. The moment before takeoff when everything was about to change. Liftoff, the helicopter becoming light, leaving the ground, rising, the sensation unlike anything else. Not like an airplane, more immediate, more present. You felt everything, every movement, every adjustment, the door open, the wind beginning, the ground dropping away below. The first flight to a landing zone, looking down at jungle, at rice paddies, at villages, trying to process everything, trying to watch for threats, trying to remember training, the sensory input overwhelming, wind, noise, vibration, movement, the view constantly changing, other helicopters in formation, the entire package flying together, the approach to the first LZ, the deceleration, the descent, the crew chief or pilot calling over the intercom, landing zone ahead, prepare to fire. The words making it real, making the M60 more than just weight, making it the tool it was designed to be, making the door gunner position more than just assignment, looking for threats, for muzzle flashes, for movement, for anything that indicated enemy presence. The training said what to look for. The reality was harder. Everything looked like it might be threat. Nothing looked certain. The jungle was just jungle. The tree line was just trees, until it wasn't. The landing, the helicopter flaring, nose up, rotor disc nearly level, descending the last few feet, troops exiting quickly, running from the aircraft, dispersing, the helicopter barely touching down, perhaps just hovering. Skids inches off the ground, then lift off again, climbing, turning, departing the LZ. The first mission might be quiet. No enemy fire, no contact, or it might be hot. Fire from the tree line. Traces, impacts on the aircraft. The difference between those outcomes determined by factors beyond anyone's control. Location, enemy presence, chance. For the new door gunner, even a quiet mission was overwhelming. The sensory experience, the altitude, the speed, the exposure, the responsibility, processing it all, trying to do the job, trying to watch for threats, trying not to fail the crew, trying not to die. The return to base, landing, shutdown, unstrapping from the harness, stepping away from the door, solid ground, the first mission complete. The realization that this would repeat, tomorrow, the day after, every day, for 12 months, 365 days. The number seemed impossible. The distance from beginning to end incomprehensible. Debriefing, what happened, what was seen. Any enemy contact, any issues with equipment, the formal process, then informal discussion with the crew. How it went, what could be better. Learning, always learning. The new door gunner slightly less new, slightly more experienced. One mission down, hundreds potentially ahead. Sleep that night was different. The body remembered the vibration, the noise. The mind replayed the mission, processed the experience. Some men slept well, exhausted, others poorly, mind racing, adrenaline slow to dissipate. Either way, morning would come. Another brief, another mission, the routine establishing itself, the reality of being a door gunner settling in, the first week becoming the first month, the beginning of a very long year. The UH-1 Iroquois was not designed for combat. It was designed as a utility transport, a helicopter to move troops and cargo, to serve in the role of trucks and jeeps but in the air. The design specifications reflected this purpose. Crew of 2 pilots, cargo capacity of 8 to 10 troops or equivalent weight, cruising speed around 120 knots, range of approximately 300 miles depending on load and conditions. The turbine engine was the key innovation. Earlier helicopters used piston engines, heavy, less reliable. The turbine was lighter, more powerful for its weight, more reliable. The Lycoming T-53 turboshaft engine produced over 1,100 shaft horsepower, enough to lift the helicopter and its load, enough to maintain flight even with battle damage in some cases. The rotor system was relatively simple. A main rotor, 2 blades, 48 feet in diameter. The blades provided lift and control. Tilting the rotor disc changed direction. The tail rotor prevented the fuselage from spinning, provided directional control. The mechanical simplicity made maintenance easier, made repairs possible even in field conditions. The fuselage was aluminum, light, strong enough for the loads it would carry, but not armored. The skin would stop nothing. Small arms fire punched through easily. The fuel tanks were soft, self-sealing in theory. In practice, holes meant fuel leaks. Enough holes meant the helicopter would crash. The cargo area was the defining feature for doctor gunners. Open on both sides, large doors, hinged at the top, could be closed but rarely were during operations. The opening was wide, perhaps 4 feet, perhaps more. Enough for troops to exit quickly, enough for cargo to be loaded, enough for door gunners to have excellent fields of fire. The floor of the cargo area was metal, marked with tie-down points, scarred from use, ammo cans stacked there. Extra equipment. The door gunner's position was just inside this door, standing or sitting, a small troop seat sometimes, other times just standing. The floor was all you had, the door frame, the roof of the cargo area, minimal structure. The M60 mounted to pintle mounts or bungee systems, the mount bolted to the floor or door frame, strong enough to support the weapon's weight and recoil. The gun could traverse nearly 90 degrees left and right, could elevate to fire upward, could depress to fire downward. The range of motion was substantial, covered most approach angles. The ammunition supply was critical. Each door gunner typically had 1,000 to 2,000 rounds. Linked belts, stored in ammunition cans. The weight was significant. Each round weighed about 25 grams. 1,000 rounds meant 25 kilograms, 55 pounds just in ammunition, plus the cans, plus the gun. The weight added up quickly. The gunner's belt attached to the aircraft at multiple points. Strong points designed to handle loads. The belt itself was nylon webbing, metal hardware. Similar to parachute harnesses, the design allowed movement, let the gunner lean out to fire, let him shift position, but kept him attached. The theory was that if you fell, lost your footing, or were incapacitated, the belt would prevent you from leaving the aircraft. The theory didn't always match reality. The belt required proper fitting, proper attachment. If too loose, you could slip out. If a strap failed, you could fall. If you were hit and fell backward, the belt might or might not catch you. The security was better than nothing, but it wasn't certainty, just probability. Another calculated risk in a role full of them. Protection for the door gunner was minimal. Some wore body armor, a ceramic plate in a vest. Protection for the torso, front and back if you had both plates. But the plates were heavy, hot, restrictive. In Vietnam's heat, the decision to wear armor was difficult. Protection versus comfort. Different conditions led to different choices. Hot weather often meant no armor. Expecting contact meant wearing it despite discomfort. The helmet was standard, steel, the same helmet infantry wore. Provided some protection against fragments, against glancing rounds, but a direct hit from most weapons would penetrate. The helmet was better than nothing, not much better. It protected against the least dangerous threats. Did little against the serious ones. The altitude at which Hueys operated created the fundamental vulnerability. Most missions flew low, below 100 feet much of the time, sometimes at treetop level, literally skimming over the canopy. The reasons were tactical. Low altitude meant less warning time for the enemy. The sound of the helicopter wouldn't carry as far, wouldn't give away approach until the aircraft was close. Low altitude also helped with navigation, visual reference to terrain, following rivers, following roads, identifying landmarks. At higher altitude, everything looked similar. At low altitude, details were visible. Navigation was easier. Pilots could see where they were going, but low altitude meant vulnerability. At 100 feet, you were within effective range of every weapon below. AK-47s, machine guns, even pistols if the helicopter was slow and low enough. The altitude that made tactics possible made survival uncertain. The helicopter couldn't climb quickly enough to escape fire once contact began. You were trapped at low altitude by physics and tactics, had to accept the exposure, had to continue the mission despite it. The combination of factors created the door gunner's reality. An unarmored aircraft, flying low, doors open, sitting or standing in that opening, connected by a belt that might or might not hold, holding a machine gun, watching jungle or rice paddies rush past below, looking for threats, knowing that anything you could see you, knowing that if it could shoot, it could hit you. The mathematics was simple and brutal. Exposure plus altitude plus enemy equals casualties. The equation worked the same every mission, only the specific numbers changed. The Huey was an excellent helicopter, reliable, capable. It did its job well. The problem wasn't the aircraft. The problem was what the mission required. Required flying low, required doors open, required someone sitting in those doors. The aircraft made the mission possible. The mission made casualties inevitable. The door gunner existed at the intersection of possibility and inevitability, flying into situations that required their presence, accepting risks that statistics said would eventually find them. The altitude mattered most. 100 feet, sometimes less. The number that defined the door gunner experience. High enough to die in a crash, low enough to be hit by anything, the worst possible combination. Neither the safety of altitude nor the options of being on the ground. Just exposed, strapped in, flying at the height where everything below could reach you, where the door gunner position became what the numbers said it was. Among the most dangerous in the war. The brief began at 0600, 6 in the morning. The operations tent, folding chairs, a map on the wall, the operations officer or platoon leader explaining the day's missions. The destination, the purpose. Troop insertion for infantry company. 8 Hueys, 16 door gunners, 2 pilots per aircraft, 4 crew members per aircraft, 32 men total in the flight. The landing zone was marked on the map. Grid coordinates, distance from base, flight time approximately 20 minutes. The intelligence brief covered known enemy activity. The area was contested, enemy presence likely, fire possible. The words were clinical, detached. They meant people would try to kill you, meant you might have to kill them, meant the mission was dangerous. But the words stayed calm, professional, as if danger was just another detail to note. Call signs were assigned, radio frequencies, emergency procedures reviewed, abort signals, what to do if aircraft was hit, if systems failed, if crew was wounded. The information came quickly. New door gunners absorbed what they could, tried to remember, tried not to let fear interfere with focus. The new door gunner sat in the back, tried to look calm, tried to appear confident, but the hands trembled slightly. The breathing was shallow, fast. The fear was present, obvious to anyone looking, but everyone had been new once. Everyone remembered their first mission. The experienced door gunners didn't comment, didn't acknowledge the fear, just let the new gunner process it, deal with it, the same way they had. Questions were invited. The operations officer asked if anyone needed clarification. The new door gunner had questions, many questions, but asking felt like admitting fear, admitting incompetence. So silence, just nodding, pretending to understand everything, pretending to be ready, the pretense transparent but accepted. The brief concluded. Time to move to the aircraft. Weapons check followed the brief. Door gunners moved to the aircraft. The Hueys sat on the flight line, lined up, waiting. The crew chief was already there, had pre-flight the aircraft earlier, had checked systems, had ensured everything worked. Now the door gunners checked their weapons. The M60 was inspected. Bolt pulled back. Chamber checked. Feed mechanism examined. The new door gunner's hands were clumsy, nervous, dropped around, fumbled with the bolt. The experienced door gunner on the other side watched, offered guidance. Show him how to do it smoothly, how to check properly. The teaching moment brief but essential, the knowledge passed from veteran to new arrival, the way it always worked. The ammunition belts were laid out, linked properly, no kinks, no damaged rounds, 1,000 rounds per gun, 2 guns per aircraft, 2,000 rounds per helicopter, 16,000 rounds total for the flight. The weight of all that ammunition was substantial, but the mission might require it, might require all of it. The new door gunner counted rounds, lost count, started over. The nervousness making simple tasks difficult. The experienced gunner didn't count, just looked. Experienced eyes seeing if the belts were right, if the load was adequate. The difference between first mission and 100th mission evident in this small task. In the confidence versus uncertainty. Test fire was brief, a few rounds. Verify the weapon functioned. Verify no malfunctions. The experienced gunner fired first. Quick burst, 3 rounds, professional, smooth. Then the new gunner's turn, the first time firing the M60 from the aircraft. The sound was distinctive, louder than expected even after range training. The recoil mild but present, the empty casings ejecting, spinning, falling to the ground. The weapon worked. That was all that mattered. Personal equipment was arranged, extra ammunition within reach, grenades if carried, water, the small items that made missions survivable. Nothing extraneous. Weight mattered. Space was limited. Only essentials. Only what you needed to fight and survive. The new door gunner had too much. Extra items. Things that seemed important. The experienced gunner suggested leaving some behind. You won't need that. Trust me. The advice taken. The load lightened. The gunner's belt was donned. Straps around the torso. Clips checked. Double-checked. The belt was life insurance. Not perfect insurance, but all you had. Making sure it was properly fitted, properly attached. The routine that would become automatic, but wasn't yet. The new door gunner struggled with the clips. The mechanism unfamiliar. The experienced gunner helped, showed which clip went where, how to secure it, how to test it, the learning continuing. The pilots arrived, conducted their pre-flight walk-around, checked control surfaces, checked for leaks, for damage, for anything wrong. The ritual before every flight. The methodical inspection that might catch problems before they became fatal. The new door gunner watched them, wondered what they were looking for, what they were checking, the mystery of helicopter maintenance, the faith required to trust that the machine would keep working, would keep flying, would bring you back. Engine start, the turbine whine beginning, low at first, rising in pitch, the rotor blades starting to turn, slowly, then faster, the Huey coming to life, the vibration starting, the noise building, everything familiar to those with experience, everything new and overwhelming to those just beginning. The new door gunner felt the vibration through the floor, through the seat, through the gunner's belt, the helicopter becoming alive, becoming real, becoming the machine that would carry him into combat. Radio checks, each aircraft in sequence, confirming communications, confirming everyone was ready, the flight leader coordinating, ensuring the package was prepared, that everyone understood the plan, that everyone was ready to execute. The voices over the radio were calm, professional, routine, as if this was just another day, just another mission, which, for them, it was. But not for the new door gunner. For him, this was everything. Takeoff was smooth, the helicopter becoming light, the skids leaving the ground, rising, the door gunner in position, strapped in, weapon ready, watching the ground fall away, the base becoming smaller, the flight forming up, 8 Hueys in formation, 2 flights of 4, chalk 1 through chalk 8. Professional, practiced. Despite the newness for some, the formation flew well. The sensation of flight was unlike anything the new door gunner had experienced. The open door, the wind, the altitude. Looking down at ground 100 feet below, the trees visible. Individual branches sometimes, the terrain passing underneath. The speed evident, the vulnerability obvious. Nothing between you and the ground except air. Except the helicopter staying airborne. The trust required. The faith in machine and pilots, the acceptance that your life depended on things beyond your control. The flight to the landing zone took 20 minutes. 20 minutes that felt like hours to the new door gunner. 20 minutes to think, to watch, to process, to imagine what might happen, to try to remember training, to rehearse mentally what to do if contact began, if fire came, if everything that briefings described actually occurred. The experienced gunner seemed calm, relaxed even, sitting in the door, one hand on the M60, looking out, scanning, but not tense, not obviously afraid. The difference between knowing and not knowing, between experience and anticipation. The jungle below was continuous, green canopy, occasional clearings, rivers visible as dark lines through the vegetation. Villages appeared occasionally. Small clusters of buildings, rice paddies around them, the geometry of agriculture visible from above. Water buffalo sometimes visible, working the paddies, the peaceful scene below contrasting with the mission's purpose, with the possibility of violence ahead. The disconnect was jarring. The world below looked calm, routine, not like a war zone, not like a place where people died. The new door gunner tried to remember what to look for. Muzzle flashes, movement, anything that indicated enemy presence. But from this altitude, at this speed, everything was unclear. The jungle was just jungle. The tree lines were just trees. How were you supposed to identify threats? How did you know what to shoot at? The question unanswered. The learning would come. But not yet. First mission. You were just trying to survive, trying not to fail, trying not to get crew killed. The crew chief's voice over the intercom. 5 minutes to LZ. The words focusing attention, making everything sharper. The new door gunner's heart rate increased, noticeable, pounding. The breathing quickened, shallow, fast. The body preparing for threat, for danger. The automatic response that couldn't be controlled, couldn't be stopped. Just accepted. Everyone felt this, even veterans. The adrenaline was same, just managed differently, used differently. The new door gunner checked the weapon again, unnecessarily. It was ready, had been ready, but the action provided something to do, something to focus on besides fear. The hands moved over the M60. Checking bolt, checking belt, checking everything that had been checked minutes before. The ritual calming slightly, the familiar motions providing small comfort. 3 minutes, the formation tightening, closing up, flying closer together, mutual support if contact began, if fire came. The door gunners shifted, made final checks, ensured ready, the nervousness visible in movements, in the way hands gripped weapons, in the way eyes scanned ahead. The experienced gunner's posture changed slightly, more alert, more ready. still calm but focused, ready for whatever came. The new door gunner tried to mimic this, tried to appear ready, professional, but the fear was visible, obvious. The way he gripped the weapon too tightly, the way his eyes darted around, looking everywhere. Seeing nothing clearly, the sensory overload beginning, too much input, too much to process. The training said what to do. The reality was harder, the execution uncertain. 1 minute, the landing zone visible ahead, a clearing, brown against green. Elephant grass. The LZ appeared cold, no sign of enemy, no smoke, no obvious threats. But that meant nothing. The enemy could be hidden, could be waiting, could open fire at any moment. The assumption was threat. The preparation was for contact. Whether it came or not was beyond control. The new door gunner saw the LZ, saw the clearing, tried to scan the tree line, tried to identify threats, saw nothing, just trees, just jungle. Was that good? Did that mean safe? Or did it mean the enemy was well hidden? The uncertainty was paralyzing. The not knowing worse than knowing. The mind racing through possibilities, through scenarios, through fears. 30 seconds. The flight began descent, slowing, approaching the LZ, the lead aircraft going in first, others following in sequence. Spacing maintained, professional, practiced. The door gunners ready, fingers on triggers but not firing, not yet. Waiting for targets, waiting for threats, waiting for something to shoot at. The helicopter descended rapidly, the sensation in the stomach, the feeling of falling, the ground approaching quickly, too quickly. The new door gunner's grip on the weapon was white-knuckled, tight. The experienced gunner was relaxed, weapon ready but not rigid. The difference evident. The veteran knew this moment, had lived it dozens of times, hundreds perhaps, knew what to expect, knew what to do. The new gunner was living it for first time. Everything was new. Everything was threatening. Everything was overwhelming. The actual landing was brief. The helicopter flaring, nose up, descending quickly, skids touching the elephant grass, troops jumping out, running from the aircraft, dispersing, moving away toward the tree line. The helicopter staying only seconds, then lifting, climbing, turning away, the entire sequence perhaps 10 seconds on the ground. Maybe less. No fire. The LZ was cold. The enemy wasn't there, or chose not to engage. The relief was immediate but confusing for the new door gunner. Was that it? Was the mission over? The anticlimax was strange. All that fear, all that preparation, all that anticipation, and nothing happened. The experienced gunner smiled slightly, nodded. Good first one. Cold LZ, the best kind. The acknowledgement that this was fortune, that it wouldn't always be this way, that other missions would be different, but the new door gunner didn't understand yet, didn't grasp that this was the exception, that most missions wouldn't have contact, but the ones that did would make up for all the quiet ones, would provide enough fear and violence for dozens of missions. The learning would come, but not yet, for now, just relief, just gratitude that the first mission was quiet. The flight back was different from the flight out. The tension releasing slightly, the new door gunner breathing more normally, heart rate slowing, processing what had happened, realizing what hadn't happened, understanding that he'd survived, that the first mission was complete, that he'd done it, not done anything particularly, just been there, been in position, been ready. But that was the job, being ready, being present, being willing to engage if required. The altitude on the return felt different, the same 100 feet, but less threatening somehow. The jungle below, less ominous. The perspective shifted slightly, not confident yet, not comfortable, but less terrified, less certain that death was imminent. The first step in the process, the beginning of adaptation, of learning to live with the fear, to function despite it. The experienced door gunner remained watchful on the return, still scanning, still alert. The mission wasn't complete until landing at base, until shutdown, until everyone was safe. The vigilance didn't stop because the insertion was complete. The threat remained. Different, perhaps less immediate, but present. The veteran knew this. The new gunner was learning. The base appeared ahead. The flight line, other helicopters, the familiar structures, safety, relative safety at least. The formation broke. Each aircraft proceeding to its parking position, the new door gunner watched the approach, the landing, smooth, professional, the skids touching, the weight settling, then the turbine beginning to wind down, the rotor blades slowing, the mission complete. Official now, done. Landing back at base, shutdown, the turbine winding down, the rotor blades slowing, stopping, the door gunner unstrapping, stepping away from the door. Solid ground, the first mission complete. The realization that this would repeat tomorrow, the day after, every day, for 12 months, 365 days, the number seemed impossible. The distance from beginning to end incomprehensible. But one mission was done. One data point, one experience completed. Legs were slightly shaky. Adrenaline wearing off, the exhaustion arriving, not physical exhaustion. The mission was only 90 minutes total, but mental, emotional, the toll of fear and vigilance for 40 minutes of flight, the processing of new experience, the integration of reality with expectation, the understanding beginning. This was what Dr. Gunning was. This was the job. This was what the next year would be. Debriefing was brief. LZ was cold. No contact, no issues. The pilots and crew confirmed. Information passed to operations. The mission logged. Complete, successful. The definition of success being that everyone came back. The standard in Vietnam. Success meant survival. Nothing more, nothing less. The new door gunner stood during the debrief, listening, learning, understanding that this routine would repeat, that each mission would have this structure, this pattern. The crew chief inspected the aircraft after shutdown, walked around, looked for damage, for problems, for anything that needed attention before the next mission. The door gunner helped, learning what to look for, how to check, the maintenance side of the position, the understanding that the helicopter needed care, needed attention, needed work to keep flying, to keep bringing crews home. The weapons were cleaned, not extensively, just quick wipe down, check for any issues. The ammunition was restocked, belts checked, damaged rounds removed, fresh ammunition loaded, preparing for the next mission, which might come in an hour, might come in 3 hours. The timing unpredictable, but the preparation constant, always ready, always prepared, always able to launch. The rest of the day brought more missions, different LZs, different troops, different destinations, the routine establishing, the pattern emerging, brief, pre-flight, flight out, landing, flight back, repeat. The cycle that would continue for 12 months, the cycle that new door gunners entered, that veterans knew intimately, the rhythm of being a helicopter crew member in Vietnam. The second mission was similar to the first. Cold LZ. No contact. But the fear was slightly less. The procedure was familiar now, known. The sequence expected. The new door gunner was still nervous, still afraid, but less paralyzed. More functional, the adaptation beginning, the learning occurring, each mission teaching, each flight adding experience, the accumulation starting. By the third mission, late in the day, the new door gunner was exhausted. The physical toll of standing in the door, the mental toll of sustained alertness, the emotional toll of repeated fear, the cumulative effect building. But the missions continued, the briefings, the flights, the landings, the returns, the pattern repeating, until the day ended, until stand down, until rest was possible. Evening brought strange feelings, the day complete. Missions flown, no casualties, no contact, the success total. But the new door gunner felt wrong, felt guilty almost, for being so afraid when nothing happened. for the relief that no enemy appeared, for the anticipation of threat that never materialized. The feelings were confused, complex, hard to articulate, hard to understand. The experienced door gunner understood, had felt the same things, still felt them sometimes. Told the new gunner, "Every mission you walk away from is success. Doesn't matter if you fired or not. Doesn't matter if enemy was there or not. You were ready. You were in position. You did the job. That's what matters." The words helped slightly, provided perspective, provided validation. Sleep that night was difficult. The body remembered the vibration, the noise, the mind replayed the missions, processed the experience. Some men slept well, exhausted, others poorly, mind racing, adrenaline slow to dissipate. Either way, morning would come. Another brief, another mission, the first day complete. 364 remaining. The tour had begun. The door gunner position was real now, not theoretical, not training, real. The first mission was done. Hundreds potentially remained. The journey had started. The learning would continue. The experience would accumulate day by day, mission by mission, for 12 long months ahead. The jungle concealed everything. Dense canopy, multiple layers of vegetation. From altitude, the jungle was a green blanket, unbroken, featureless except for occasional clearings or rivers. What existed beneath that canopy was invisible. Could be nothing. Could be enemy forces. Could be ambush positions. The helicopter flew over without knowing, without seeing, vulnerable to what couldn't be seen. The AK-47 was the primary enemy weapon. Soviet design. Manufactured in multiple countries. China, Eastern Europe. The weapon was ubiquitous, reliable, simple, chambered in 7.62 by 39 millimeter. Effective range around 300 meters, but effective range meant different things depending on target. Against a helicopter at 100 feet, the effective range was essentially the maximum range. At that distance, the helicopter filled enough of the sight picture that aimed fire wasn't required. Just point and shoot. The round from an AK-47 could penetrate helicopter skin. The aluminum fuselage provided no protection. The bullet would pass through. If it hit critical systems, engine, transmission, hydraulics, the helicopter could crash. If it hit crew members, injury or death. The door gunners were completely exposed. No protection. A round that hit them wasn't slowed or deflected, just impact. The rate of fire from an AK-47 was approximately 600 rounds per minute. Full automatic. A practiced soldier could fire controlled bursts, 3 to 5 rounds, multiple bursts in seconds. Against a helicopter approaching or departing, multiple enemy soldiers with AK-47s created substantial volume of fire. Dozens of rounds in the air. Probability dictated some would hit. Where they hit determined consequences. Machine guns posed greater threat. The RPD light machine gun. Belt-fed. Same caliber as the AK-47. Higher rate of fire. 750 rounds per minute. More sustained fire. The RPD could engage a helicopter throughout its approach. Could track it during landing. Could continue firing during departure. The sustained fire meant more rounds on target. More probability of critical hits. Heavy machine guns were worse. The DSHK Soviet design. Caliber 12.7 millimeter. The same as the American .50 caliber. Heavy round. Powerful. Could penetrate light armor. Could damage engine components even with near misses. Rate of fire 600 rounds per minute. Effective range over 1,000 meters. Against a helicopter at 100 feet, the DSHK was devastating. A single burst could destroy the aircraft, could kill everyone aboard. The Chinese Type 53 heavy machine gun was similar, slightly different design. Same caliber, same devastating effect. These weapons were less common than AK-47s or RPDs, but they existed. Enemy forces positioned them to defend important areas, to cover likely helicopter routes, to create no-fly zones where helicopters that entered likely wouldn't leave. Anti-aircraft weapons appeared later in the war. 37mm guns, designed specifically to engage aircraft. Radar-directed in some cases, optical sights in others. Rate of fire, approximately 160 rounds per minute. Each round was high explosive, proximity fused, didn't need direct hit, could damage or destroy aircraft with near miss. The fragments from explosion could shred helicopter, could kill crew, could cause catastrophic failure. The RPG-7 created unique terror. Rocket-propelled grenade launcher, shoulder-fired, anti-tank weapon, shaped charge warhead, designed to penetrate armor. Against a helicopter, the effect was complete destruction. The warhead would detonate on impact. The shaped charge would penetrate. The explosion would destroy the aircraft. Everyone aboard would die. The crash would be unsurvivable. The RPG's effective range was approximately 300 meters. Against slow-moving targets, stationary targets, against a helicopter moving at 60 knots, the effective range decreased. The gunner had to lead the target, had to judge speed and distance. Not easy, but not impossible. RPG teams practiced, became proficient. Door gunners watched for them, for the distinctive tube shape, for the backblast signature when fired. Seeing an RP team meant immediate engagement. Kill them before they could fire. The priority was absolute. Command-detonated mines affected helicopters in landing zones. The enemy would prepare LZs, bury explosives, run wires to concealed positions, wait for helicopters to land, detonate. The explosion could destroy helicopters, could kill everyone aboard, could kill the troops being inserted. Door gunners could do nothing about this threat. Couldn't see buried mines, couldn't prevent detonation, just another danger to accept. The enemy learned helicopter tactics, studied approach patterns, identified likely landing zones, understood that helicopters had to slow down to land, had to hover or nearly hover. That was the moment of maximum vulnerability. Speed near zero, altitude minimal, predictable position. Enemy forces prepared ambush positions covering LZZs, positioned multiple weapons, coordinated fire, waited for helicopters to commit to landing, then opened fire from multiple positions simultaneously. The tactic was effective. A helicopter in the landing phase had limited options, couldn't accelerate quickly, couldn't climb quickly. The physics of helicopter flight meant that transitional lift, the phase between hover and forward flight, required time. Time measured in seconds, but seconds where the helicopter was most vulnerable, where enemy fire was most effective, where casualties were most likely. Tree lines were particular danger areas, the edge between clearing and jungle. Perfect concealment for enemy positions. Good fields of fire into the clearing, into the landing zone. Door gunners watched tree lines constantly, scanned for muzzle flashes, for movement, for anything that indicated enemy presence. Training emphasized tree lines. Experience reinforced it. Threat came from the tree line more than anywhere else. Muzzle flash was the primary indicator. The bright flash when a weapon fired, visible even in daylight, more visible at dawn or dusk. Door gunners were trained to identify it, to locate it, to return fire immediately. The doctrine was simple. Suppress the threat, put fire on the position. Even if you couldn't see the enemy soldier, you could see where he was shooting from. Fire there. Make him stop. Make him take cover. Break his aim. That was the goal. Tracer rounds worked both ways. American tracers showed door gunners where their fire was going. Let them adjust. Walk fire onto targets. But tracers also showed the enemy where fire was coming from. Every fifth round leaving a visible trail, leading directly back to the helicopter, to the door gunner. The enemy could see the source, could adjust their fire, could aim at the tracer origin point. The visibility that helped the door gunner also helped the enemy. Another trade-off, another calculated risk. The sound of impacts on the helicopter was distinctive. Metallic pings, thuds, the aluminum skin being penetrated. Sometimes you heard it, sometimes you didn't. The noise level in the helicopter was high. Rotor blades, turbine, wind, the M60 of firing. But impacts often registered. A sound different from normal operations. A sound that meant you were taking fire. That rounds were hitting. That damage was occurring. The pilots would call it over the intercom. Taking fire. The words making official what the door gunners might have already known. The helicopter would maneuver. Try to evade. Try to get away from the threat. But options were limited. At low altitude. During landing or takeoff, maneuvering was constrained. The pilots did what they could. The door gunners returned fire. Everyone did their job, hoped it was enough. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes rounds hit critical systems. The engine, the transmission, the hydraulics. The helicopter would lose power or lose control. Would have to land immediately. Emergency landing, controlled if possible. Crash if not. The crew and any troops aboard faced whatever came next. Ground contact, possible capture, possible death. The scenarios everyone knew about, that training covered, that no one wanted to experience. Sometimes rounds hit crew members, the door gunner, the crew chief, the pilots. The wounds varied, minor to fatal. The location of impact determined severity. Extremities might be survivable. Torso or head often weren't. The door gunners were most exposed, most likely to be hit. The statistics reflected this. Door gunner casualties exceeded other crew positions. The exposure guaranteed it. The cumulative effect of these threats created the door gunner reality. Every mission brought exposure to multiple threat types. Small arms, machine guns, RPGs, anti-aircraft weapons, mines. Each threat capable of killing. Each present in various combinations depending on location and enemy strength. The door gunner sat in the open door, watched the jungle, watched the tree lines, waited for threats to reveal themselves, returned fire when they did, hoped the helicopter wasn't hit, hoped he wasn't hit, hoped the mission completed without casualties, but hope wasn't strategy, wasn't protection, was just what you held on to between missions. During missions, there was only vigilance, only the weapon, only the training, only the crew working together, only the mathematics of exposure and probability, only the reality that every mission was exposure. Every exposure was risk. Every risk accumulation toward the statistical certainty that eventually the fire from below would find you. The missions did not vary greatly in basic structure. Brief, pre-flight, flight to destination, execute mission, return to base. The pattern repeated daily, sometimes multiple times per day. The rhythm became familiar quickly, the routine established, but within that routine, each mission was different. Different locations, different troops, different enemy situations, different outcomes. Troop insertions formed the most common mission type. Infantry companies needed transport to operational areas. 8 to 10 troops per helicopter, multiple helicopters per company. The flight would depart base together, fly in formation to the landing zone, insert troops, depart. The entire sequence might take an hour, from brief to return. Longer if the LZ was distant, shorter if close. The approach phase was consistently the most dangerous. The helicopter descending toward the LZ, speed decreasing, altitude decreasing. The enemy, if present, would wait for this moment. Maximum vulnerability. The helicopter committed to landing. Limited ability to maneuver. The door gunners would begin firing on approach. Suppressive fire into tree lines, into likely enemy positions. The goal was to keep enemy soldiers' heads down, to prevent aimed fire at the helicopter, to protect the aircraft during the most vulnerable phase. Landing was brief. Seconds, the helicopter touching down or hovering inches off the ground. Troops exiting rapidly, running from the aircraft, dispersing into the LZ, moving toward cover, the helicopter not waiting, lifting immediately, climbing, accelerating, getting away from the LZ. The exposure time minimized, but those few seconds felt longer, time distorted by adrenaline and fear, by vulnerability and danger, by knowing that if enemy fire came, there was nowhere to hide. Extractions reversed the process, but were often more dangerous. The troops being extracted had made contact, had been in combat. The LZ was likely hot, under fire. The enemy knew helicopters would come, would be waiting. The approach would draw fire. The landing would draw fire. The entire sequence occurred under fire. Door gunners fired continuously, trying to suppress, trying to protect, watching troops load, counting them, ensuring everyone was aboard. Then departure, climbing, turning, evading, the relief of altitude, of distance, of survival. Resupply missions brought ammunition, water, food and equipment to fire bases, to units in the field. These missions were predictable. The enemy learned resupply schedules, knew which fire bases received supplies, knew when helicopters would come, could prepare. Position weapons. Wait. Resupply missions into fire bases under siege were particularly dangerous. The enemy surrounding the base would engage helicopters on approach. The door gunners would fire at targets visible around the perimeter, at muzzle flashes, at positions. The helicopter would land, unload quickly, depart immediately. The exposure time minimized, but still substantial. Medical evacuations carried the highest emotional weight. Wounded soldiers needed extraction, needed medical care, needed it quickly. The helicopters marked with red crosses, international symbol of medical neutrality. The Geneva Convention protected medical aircraft. The enemy often ignored this. Targeted medevac helicopters deliberately. The red crosses became aiming points. The missions were desperate. Flying into active combat, landing in unsecured areas, loading wounded while under fire. Door gunners providing covering fire. Crew chiefs and medics loading patients. Everyone working together. Everyone exposed. Everyone at risk. The medevac missions created particular stress. The wounded soldiers visible, the injuries visible, the pain and fear evident. The door gunners maintained fire. Protected the aircraft, protected the wounded, but couldn't help directly, couldn't provide medical care, could only do their job, suppress threats, keep firing, trust others to handle the wounded. The compartmentalization required was difficult. Seeing suffering, being unable to address it, only able to prevent more suffering by keeping the helicopter safe. Reconnaissance missions involved flying over areas to observe, to identify enemy positions, to assess terrain, to gather intelligence. These missions often flew slower, lower, more exposed, deliberately drawing fire to locate enemy positions. The tactic worked. The enemy would fire, reveal themselves, but revealing themselves meant firing at the helicopter, at the crew. The door gunners returned fire, marked positions, reported. The mission gathered information. The cost was exposure, was vulnerability, was accepting fire to accomplish the mission. Fire support missions used helicopters as weapons platforms. Door gunners engaged ground targets directly, suppressed enemy positions, supported ground operations. These missions involved deliberate exposure to enemy fire, flying at low altitude over enemy positions, taking fire, returning fire. The helicopter as a gun truck, mobile, flexible, vulnerable. The door gunners fired until ammunition depleted, until barrels overheated, until mission complete or aircraft damage forced return to base. The accumulation of missions created psychological weight. Each mission was exposure. Each exposure was risk. The first mission was frightening because of the unknown. The 10th mission was frightening because of what was known. The 100th mission was frightening because the statistics were catching up. The cumulative probability increasing. The door gunner who survived 50 missions had beaten odds. The one who survived 100 had been very lucky. The one approaching 150 was living on borrowed time. Close calls accumulated with missions. Rounds passing close, heard but not hitting, felt but not impacting, tracers visible. Passing through the cargo area, passing where the door gunner had been standing seconds before. Near misses that weren't misses by much. Inches. The difference between survival and casualty measured in very small distances. In timing. In chance. Some missions saw hits, rounds impacting the helicopter, damage to skin, to systems, emergency landings, maintenance required, the helicopter repairable, the crew surviving, but the reminder clear. That could have been worse, could have hit critical systems, could have hit crew members, could have crashed. The close call becoming data point, adding to the accumulation, to the understanding that survival was temporary, that luck had limits. The door gunners who flew these missions learned to identify threats faster, learned to engage more effectively, learned which tree lines were dangerous, which LZs were usually hot, which areas drew fire consistently. The knowledge accumulated with the missions, experience replacing training, survival creating veterans. Those who survived became better at surviving, became more effective, but also became more aware, more understanding of the risks, more conscious of the probability. The rhythm of missions created the tour structure. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The calendar marked with missions flown, with days remaining. The tour was 12 months, 365 days. The number counted down, slowly at first, then faster as the end approached. Each mission brought the end closer, but each mission also brought risk. The paradox of door gunning. Survival required flying missions. Flying missions threatened survival. The only way out was through. Through all the missions, through all the exposure, through all the probability, to the end of 12 months. If you made it. Morning began early. 0500 often. 5 in the morning. The heat hadn't built yet. The air was almost cool, almost comfortable. Within an hour, that would change. But for now, the morning was the best part of the day, the brief respite before heat and humidity became oppressive. The barracks, or tent that served as living space, was basic. Cots, mosquito netting, personal items kept minimal, lockers or footlockers for storage. The space was functional, not comfortable, not meant to be, just shelter, just a place to sleep between missions. The door gunners shared this space with other crew members, with other soldiers, the community of those who flew, who understood, who shared the experience. Morning routine was quick: wash, dress, flight suit or jungle fatigues. The uniform varied by unit. The function was same. Clothing for flight operations, for the heat, for the work. Boots were important, good boots, broken in, comfortable. Door gunners stood for hours. Good boots mattered. Breakfast was available. Hot food if the mess hall was functional, sea rations if not. Coffee was essential, strong, hot, the caffeine necessary, the ritual comforting. Door gunners learned to eat when food was available. Missions might preclude lunch, might extend through dinner. Eating when possible was survival skill. The flight line came alive early. Crew chiefs worked on helicopters, pre-flight inspections, maintenance, repairs. The work never stopped. Helicopters required constant attention. The environment was harsh. Sand, dust, heat, moisture, all degraded systems. The crew chiefs kept aircraft flying. Their work enabled missions, enabled everything. First mission brief came at 0600. 6, the operations tent, the familiar routine. Map on the wall, operations officer or platoon leader explaining, destination, purpose, intelligence, the information delivered professionally, questions answered, clarifications made. Then to the aircraft. The brief consumed 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then execution. Door gunners checked weapons. Every morning, every mission. The M60 inspected. Bolt, feed mechanism, barrel, everything checked. Ammunition loaded, belts linked, tracers properly spaced. The routine was automatic for veterans, still deliberate for newer door gunners, but everyone checked, every time. The weapon had to work, had to be ready. Lives depended on it. The gunner's belt was donned, strapped in, checked. The routine so familiar it became unconscious, like putting on a seatbelt, the motion automatic, the security assumed. Until something made you think about it, made you question, made you check again, ensure it was properly connected, properly fitted. The belt was all that prevented falling, worth the extra check. The first mission launched around 0700, 7 in the morning. The flight time varied. 30 minutes out, 30 back. Add time on the ground, maybe 10 minutes. The mission consumed 90 minutes. 2 hours with brief and debrief. Back at base by 0900. 9. Time for second mission. Multiple missions per day was normal. 3 was common. 4 happened. 5 occasionally. Some days were easier. Maintenance, weather, reduced operational tempo. Other days were intense. Major operations. High demand for helicopters. Crews flew until dark, until exhausted, until aircraft required maintenance, until they physically couldn't continue. The time between missions was brief. Refuel the aircraft. Rearm if ammunition was expended. Crew rest. Perhaps 20 minutes, perhaps 30. Eat if possible. Use the latrine. Brief next mission, then fly again. The cycle repeated, mission after mission, the day consumed by flying, by operations, by the war. The physical toll accumulated through the day, standing in the door for hours, the harness cutting into shoulders, into torso, the weapon heavy, arms tired from holding it, from controlling it, from managing recoil, the wind constant, dehydrating, exhausting. The noise damaging hearing permanently, tinnitus starting, ringing that wouldn't stop. The price of the position. The sensory overload never stopped during flight. The rotor noise, the turbine whine, the wind, the visual processing, scanning constantly, looking for threats, for targets, for anything. The brain working continuously, processing information, making decisions, identifying, assessing, the mental fatigue accumulating, harder to maintain alertness as the day progressed, harder to stay sharp, but the threats didn't decrease. The danger remained constant, alertness remained required. Heat was enemy. Vietnam was hot, humid, the combination oppressive. Inside the helicopter, wind provided some cooling, but the sun was direct. The metal and plastic of the aircraft absorbed heat, radiated it. The door gunners worked in this environment, sweat constant, dehydration a risk, salt tablets taken, water consumed, never enough water, always thirsty, always hot. Lunch was whenever possible. Between missions, if timing allowed. Sea rations often, eaten quickly. The food was fuel, not pleasure. Just calories, just energy to continue. To fly the next mission, the appetite was often absent. Stress, heat, fatigue. But eating was necessary. The body needed fuel. Door gunners learned to eat regardless of appetite. Afternoon missions continued the pattern, same as morning. Brief, fly, execute, return, debrief, repeat. The heat worse in afternoon. The fatigue deeper. The accumulation of the day's stress visible in movements, in reactions, in the way door gunners moved more slowly, responded more deliberately. The sharpness of morning dulled by hours of operations. Some missions saw combat, contact with enemy, fire exchanged, close calls, hits on aircraft, casualties sometimes. Other missions were quiet, routine, uneventful. The variation was unpredictable. You briefed every mission expecting combat, prepared for it. Sometimes it came, sometimes it didn't. The uncertainty was constant. The preparation was always the same. The emotional toll paralleled the physical. Adrenaline spikes during hot missions, the rush, the focus, the clarity that came with immediate danger. Then the crash afterward, the exhaustion, the shaking, the processing of what happened, what could have happened, the relief of survival mixed with awareness that tomorrow brought new exposure, new risk. The emotional cycle repeated with each mission, each day, the cumulative weight building, relationships with crew members deepened, flying together daily, depending on each other, trusting completely. The pilots got you there and back. The crew chief kept the aircraft flying. The door gunners provided the firepower. Everyone's survival depended on everyone else. Bonds formed quickly, became strong. These were the people who understood, who shared the experience, who knew without explanation. The relationship with infantry was different. Door gunners transported them, protected them during insertion and extraction, but the experiences diverged. The infantry stayed in the jungle, humped through terrain, lived in the field, ate sea rations continuously, slept in the rain. The door gunners flew back to base, had showers sometimes, hot food sometimes, relative safety. The difference created distance despite shared mission, different worlds, different experiences, mutual respect but limited common ground. Evening brought stand down eventually, last mission complete. Aircraft shut down, maintenance performed, weapons cleaned, equipment secured. The day's operations finished, the transition from combat operations to downtime. The shift was abrupt. Minutes earlier, flying missions, now free time. The contrast was jarring. The mind struggled to shift, to release the vigilance, to relax. Dinner was communal when possible. Mess hall, hot food, the meal better than lunch, more substantial, more time to eat. The conversation with other crew members, with other door gunners, sharing stories, discussing the day, processing experiences, the informal debriefing that mattered more than the formal one. Understanding you weren't alone. Others experienced the same things, felt the same fears, had the same close calls. Evening activities varied. Some men wrote letters, maintained connection with home, with family, with the world beyond Vietnam. Others read, listened to music, played cards, drank if alcohol was available. The activities were distraction, escape, ways to fill time between missions, ways to avoid thinking about tomorrow, about the missions ahead, about the statistics accumulating. Sleep came with difficulty sometimes. The mind replaying the day, processing missions, remembering close calls, imagining what could have happened. The adrenaline slow to fully dissipate. The body tired, but the mind active. Tinnitus constant, the ringing that prevented complete silence, that kept the war present even in rest. Some door gunners slept well, exhausted. Others struggled, night after night. The accumulation of stress preventing rest, preventing recovery. Dreams, when they came, sometimes involved flying. Missions, combat. The subconscious processing during sleep what couldn't be fully processed while awake. Nightmares occasionally, waking in fear, in confusion, the transition from dream to reality jarring, disorienting, requiring moments to understand where you were, that you were safe, that the mission was dream not memory. Though sometimes the line between them blurred, the rhythm repeated, day after day, week after week, month after month. The tour was 12 months, 52 weeks, 365 days, the number counted down, marked on calendars, tracked obsessively. Each day complete was one day closer to end. One day survived, one day less remaining. The mathematics of the tour, the arithmetic of survival. Some door gunners were wounded, left the position, were evacuated, returned to the unit after recovery if wounds weren't severe, rotated to other positions if they were. The casualty rate meant turnover was constant. New door gunners arrived, veterans left. The cycle continued. The position always needed filling. Others completed tours, survived 12 months. left Vietnam, went home. The survivors were statistical outliers, lucky, skilled, both. They had beaten significant odds, had flown hundreds of missions, had faced countless threats, had survived all of them. The accomplishment was remarkable, the cost was high, but survival meant going home, meant the tour was over, meant the door gunner position was behind them. The rhythm of 12 months defined the door gunner experience, the daily cycle, the weekly accumulation, the monthly progression toward end. The routine that made survival possible, the repetition that became life, the pattern that continued regardless of fear, regardless of casualties, regardless of anything. The rhythm that was Vietnam for those who sat in the doors. Not all door gunners completed their tours. The statistics said as much. The casualty rates meant that many who started as door gunners didn't finish. The mathematics was clear. Fly enough missions and the probability of being hit approached certainty. For some, that moment came early in their tour. For others, later. But for many, it came. The moment arrived without warning, usually. One mission among dozens, among hundreds. Nothing distinguished it beforehand. The brief was routine. The pre-flight normal, the flight to the LZ unremarkable. Then contact, fire from below, rounds impacting the helicopter, the distinctive sound, metal being penetrated, systems being damaged, or worse. The door gunner might see the muzzle flash, might identify the threat, might begin to return fire, or might not, might simply feel the impact, the strike, the round hitting, entering the body. The sensation was described differently by different men. Some felt immediate pain, sharp, intense. Others felt impact but not immediate pain. The adrenaline masking it, the shock delaying full awareness, the wound present but not yet fully registered. The location of the wound determined everything. Extremities, arms or legs, were survivable usually. Painful, requiring medical treatment, but survivable. The door gunner might continue fighting, might continue firing, the adrenaline allowing function despite injury, despite pain, the mission continuing, the weapon still in use, the position still manned, until the helicopter landed, until medical care was available, until the wound was treated. Torso wounds were more serious, damage to organs, to vital structures. These wounds required immediate medical attention, required medevac. The door gunner couldn't continue fighting, couldn't remain in position. The crew chief might take over the gun, might continue the mission while the wounded door gunner received first aid. Basic treatment, pressure on wounds, attempts to stop bleeding, to stabilize, until landing, until real medical care. Head wounds were often fatal. The helmet provided some protection against fragments, against glancing rounds, but direct hits penetrated. The results were catastrophic, immediate incapacitation, death within moments or instantly. The other crew members would know, would see, would understand, would have to continue the mission despite the loss, despite witnessing it, despite everything. The mission didn't stop because someone died. Continued until complete, until return to base, until the body could be removed, until the grief could begin. The helicopter itself might be hit critically. Engine damage, transmission damage, hydraulic failure, control system damage. The aircraft losing power, losing control, requiring emergency landing. The pilots would call it going down. The words making real what everyone feared, the crew preparing, the door gunners securing weapons, securing themselves, bracing, the landing coming, controlled if possible, crash if not. The emergency landing might occur in hostile territory, near enemy positions. The crew and any troops aboard would exit quickly, establish security, prepare for contact, for possible ground attack, for the situation every helicopter crew member trained for but hoped never to experience. The rescue birds would come. Eventually, if possible. But the time between crash and rescue could be minutes, could be hours, could involve combat on the ground, could involve casualties beyond those from the crash itself. Some emergency landings occurred in secure areas, the helicopter damaged but able to reach friendly territory. To reach base, the landing rough but survivable, the crew shaken but alive, the aircraft damaged, requiring repair, perhaps beyond repair. But the crew survived, walked away, would fly again. Different aircraft, same mission, the close call becoming story, becoming experience, becoming data point in the accumulation of near misses that defined survival. The wounded door gunner, if he survived initial injury, would be evacuated. Medical helicopter, dust-off, the same mission type he had participated in. Now he was the patient. The wounded soldier being extracted, being flown to medical facilities. The irony not lost. The role reversal complete. From protector to protected. From door gunner to casualty. Treatment at field hospitals was immediate. Combat surgery, stabilization. The goal was survival. Keep the patient alive. Treat the immediate threats. Blood loss, shock, organ damage. The medicine was practiced, efficient, the surgeons experienced. They had treated hundreds, thousands, more wounded than any civilian hospital would see. The expertise was profound, the success rate remarkable. Many wounded soldiers survived injuries that would have been fatal in earlier wars. Medical advances, rapid evacuation, skilled treatment, all combined to save lives. Recovery depended on wounds. Minor wounds meant return to duty, perhaps different position, perhaps same unit. The door gunner returning to fly, to resume missions, the wound a reminder, a scar. But survival meant continuation, completion of tour, eventually going home. The tour continuing despite injury, despite the close call. Serious wounds meant evacuation from Vietnam, medical facilities in Japan, in the Philippines, eventually stateside. The tour ending not with completion but with injury. The 12 months cut short. Survival but at cost. Permanent injury often. Disability, the body marked by Vietnam. By the moment when statistics found you, when probability became reality, when the wound occurred. Some door gunners died. The wound was fatal, or the crash was unsurvivable, or the medical care, despite best efforts, wasn't enough. The death might be instant, might be in the helicopter, might be at the field hospital, might be days later from complications, but the result was same. The door gunner didn't go home, didn't complete the tour, became a casualty statistic, a name on a memorial. A family informed, a loss recorded. The impact on the crew was immediate. Loss of crew member meant loss of teammate, of friend, of someone you'd flown with, depended on, trusted. The grief was real, the loss personal, but the mission continued. A replacement would come, another door gunner. The position would be filled, the operations would continue. The war didn't pause for grief. Didn't acknowledge loss beyond paperwork and memorial services. The rhythm continued. The missions continued. The door gunner position continued, with someone new strapping in, taking position, facing the same risks, the same statistics, the same probability. For those who witnessed casualties, the impact was lasting. Seeing crew members hit, seeing them wounded or killed. The images stayed, the sounds stayed. The smell of blood stayed. The memory didn't fade, was processed over time, was integrated into experience, but never disappeared, never stopped affecting those who witnessed, who survived when others didn't, who continued flying when others couldn't. The moment when statistics find you defined many door gunner experiences. For some, it meant wounds, recovery, survival, continuation. For others, it meant worse. The position's reputation was earned. The casualty rates were real. The danger was constant. The mathematics of exposure and probability eventually caught many. The statistics weren't abstract, weren't theoretical, were personal, were real, were the Dora Gunner experience for those who didn't complete their tours untouched. The tour calendar counted down. 12 months. 365 days. The number decreased with each sunrise, with each mission flown, with each day survived. Eventually, the end approached, the tour entering its final weeks. Final days, the short timer zone, the period when going home became real, when survival meant just a few more missions, just a little more luck, just a little more time. The anxiety during this period was specific, different from earlier tour anxiety. Early in the tour, everything was unknown. The fear was general, abstract. Later, after months of missions, the fear was informed, based on experience, on knowledge of threats, on understanding of risks. But short-timer anxiety was different. Was the fear of dying when you could almost leave, almost go home, almost survive? The mathematics seemed cruel, having survived 9 months, 10 months, 11 months, having beaten odds for that long, now facing the possibility of casualty with weeks remaining, days remaining. The unfairness of it was obvious, but war wasn't fair. Statistics didn't care how close you were to completion. Threat remained constant. Each mission was exposure. The final missions held same risk as the first. Some units rotated short-timers out of flight status, gave them ground jobs, administrative work, maintenance support, anything that didn't involve flying missions. The practice recognized the psychological burden, the anxiety, the impact on performance. A door gunner distracted by counting days might miss threats, might not be fully present, might endanger the crew. Moving them to other duties protected everyone. Other units lacked this flexibility, needed every door gunner, every crew member. The operational tempo was too high, the demands too great. Short timers continued flying, continued missions, until the very end, until orders came for rotation home, until the tour officially ended. The anxiety managed, controlled, pushed aside. The job continued regardless. The final mission was significant, not different from other missions operationally. Same brief, same procedures, same execution, but psychologically, it was the last, the final exposure, the final risk. Complete this mission and the tour was over. Complete this mission and survival was achieved. 12 months successfully navigated. Hundreds of missions flown. The statistics beaten. The brief for the final mission was heard differently. Every detail noted, every potential threat assessed. The door gunner was more alert, more focused. The mission mattered more. Not tactically. Tactically, it was same as any other, but personally, this was the one that determined whether survival remained theoretical or became real, whether going home happened or not. The pre-flight was thorough. Every check performed carefully, the weapon inspected completely, the ammunition verified, the gunner's belt checked and rechecked, everything confirmed. The routine was same as always, but the attention was greater, the care more pronounced, nothing left to chance on the final mission. The flight to the LZ proceeded normally. Formation, flying, low altitude, the familiar rhythm, the door gunner scanning, watching, alert, the crew knowing this was his last mission, the pilots flying carefully, the crew chief watchful. Everyone wanted the final mission to be uneventful, to be smooth, to be routine, to end with everyone safe, with the short timer surviving, with the statistics not finding him on the last day. The mission itself varied. Some final missions were quiet, no contact, no fire, routine insertion or resupply, complete without incident. The flight back to base was relief. Celebration, the tour complete, the survival achieved, the door gunner unstrapping for the final time. Stepping away from the position. Done. Finished. The 12 months over. Other final missions saw combat. Contact at the LZ. Fire taken. Fire returned. The door gunner fighting on his last mission. The irony not lost. The final exposure being actual threat, actual danger, but survival meant completing the mission, meant returning to base despite the contact, despite the fire, meant the statistics missed one more time, meant luck held to the end. Some short-timers were hit on final missions, wounded, the bitter timing, the cruel probability, having survived so long, so many missions, then hit near the end. The wound ending the combat tour early, but differently than hoped, not walking away healthy, leaving on medevac, leaving wounded, the survival incomplete, marked by injury on the last mission, the memory forever tied to that timing, that unfairness. Very few were killed on final missions. The statistics made it unlikely. Most who died did so earlier in tours. But unlikely didn't mean impossible. Some door gunners died with days left, with missions left. The loss was tragic in ways that any combat death was tragic. But the timing made it seem worse, more cruel, more unfair. The family at home expecting their soldier to return soon, then receiving news of death instead. The devastation complete. For those who completed final missions successfully, the walk away was significant. Unstrapping from the gunner's belt, final time. Securing the weapon, final time. Stepping out of the helicopter, final time. The position that had defined 12 months. That had been the daily reality. That had brought fear and adrenaline and exhaustion and pride. That position was no longer yours, was someone else's now, was behind you. The feelings were complex. Relief was obvious. Survival achieved. Gratitude for luck, for skill, for whatever combination of factors meant you survived when others didn't. But also guilt. Survivor's guilt. The recognition that crew members lost didn't make it. That door gunners killed or wounded didn't survive their tours. That your survival meant luck others didn't have. The guilt was irrational but real, felt by many who survived combat. Saying goodbye to crew was difficult. Bonds formed over months, flying together, depending on each other, trusting completely, now breaking those bonds, leaving, going home while they stayed, while they continued flying, continued facing threats. The goodbye was necessary, was part of rotation, but wasn't easy. The friendships formed in combat were intense, deep. Leaving them was hard. The processing for departure took days. Paperwork, medical checks, equipment turn-in, the bureaucracy of leaving, the military's need to account for everything, to document, to process. The days between final mission and actual departure were strange. Still in Vietnam, still at the base, but no longer flying. No longer a door gunner, in limbo, between combat and home, between war and peace. The flight home was commercial, same as arrival but reversed. Hours over the Pacific, leaving Vietnam behind, physically, geographically, but not mentally, not emotionally. The year's experiences came along, the memories, the trauma, the loss, all carried home. Invisible baggage. Weight not measured in pounds, but present nonetheless. Arrival stateside was anticlimactic often. Processing at military facilities, brief celebration, then dispersal, going to homes, to families, to lives that had continued during the deployment, that had changed, that were familiar but different. The soldier was different too. The door gunner who left 12 months prior wasn't the person who returned. War had changed him. Vietnam had marked him. The door gunner experience had shaped him. The person who came home carried those 12 months, carried those missions, carried everything that came with sitting in that open door. The reunion with family was complicated. Joy at return, relief at survival, but also distance, gap in experience. The family hadn't been there, hadn't flown the missions, hadn't faced the threats, couldn't fully understand. The door gunner couldn't fully explain. The words weren't adequate. The experience resisted description, so there was reunion but also separation, physical presence but emotional distance. The transition to civilian life, or to non-combat military life, was jarring. The pace was different, slower, less urgent. The threats were absent. No one was trying to kill you. The daily routine lacked the intensity of combat operations, lacked the adrenaline, lacked the purpose. Some veterans adapted quickly, found new purpose, new routine. Others struggled, found civilian life empty, found peacetime meaningless after war. The door gunner position was behind them, but also wasn't. The experience remained. The memories didn't fade. The skills stayed. The knowledge of what it meant to sit in that door, to face those threats, to survive those missions. That knowledge was permanent, was part of identity now, was part of who they were. The door gunner experience had ended. The door gunner identity hadn't. Some veterans talked about their experience, shared stories, processed through conversation, through community with other veterans. Found others who understood, who had been there, who knew without explanation. These connections helped, provided context, provided validation. The door gunner experience was real, was significant. Others recognized it, acknowledged it. Other veterans didn't talk, kept the experience private, locked it away, tried to move forward without looking back, tried to leave Vietnam in Vietnam. The strategy worked for some. The separation was possible. Life continued. The past stayed past. For others, the silence created problems, the unexpressed trauma, the unprocessed experience, the weight carried alone. The final missions marked the transition from combat to whatever came next, from door gunner to veteran, from war to peace. The mission itself might have been routine, might have been combat, might have been quiet or loud, but its significance was personal, was about survival, about completion, about beating the statistics, about the 12 months ending, about going home. For those who flew final missions and survived, the memory remained clear. The relief, the gratitude, the complex emotions, the recognition that others hadn't made it, that the position continued, that new door gunners were strapping in, taking position, beginning their tours, facing the same risks, the cycle continuing, the war continuing, the door gunner position continuing, even as individuals left it behind. Coming home didn't mean leaving the war behind. The door gunners who survived and returned brought Vietnam with them. Not intentionally, not by choice, but inevitably. The experience came along, embedded, inseparable. Part of who they were now. The physical injuries were obvious, visible. Wounds that had healed but left scars, tissue damage, functional limitations. Some door gunners came home missing parts of themselves. Fingers, hands, feet, limbs, the casualties of combat. The physical price paid. These injuries were acknowledged, recognized. Veterans received medical care, disability compensation. The system addressed physical wounds. Hearing loss affected nearly every door gunner. The constant noise exposure, the rotor blades, the turbine, the M60 firing, the wind, all without adequate hearing protection. The cumulative damage was permanent. Some door gunners were partially deaf. Others had significant hearing loss, required hearing aids, struggled with conversation, with understanding speech. The silence they'd survived to reach was denied by the damage done. Tinnitus was universal, the constant ringing, high-pitched tone, present always, never stopping. Some door gunners heard it faintly, background noise. Others heard it prominently, interfering with sleep, with concentration, with peace. The sound from Vietnam that never ended, that followed them home, that played continuously, reminder and burden. The psychological wounds were less visible, less acknowledged. PTSD wasn't well understood in the 1970s. The term existed but wasn't widely used. The symptoms were present but not recognized. Door gunners experiencing nightmares, flashbacks, hypervigilance, anxiety, depression, all symptoms of trauma, of combat stress, of what prolonged exposure to mortal threat does to human psychology. The nightmares were common. Dreams of missions, of combat, of being hit, of helicopters crashing, of crew members dying, the subconscious processing what couldn't be fully processed while awake. The dreams were vivid, realistic. Waking from them was disorienting, confusing, the boundary between dream and memory sometimes unclear, the past invading sleep, making rest difficult, making recovery harder. Flashbacks occurred for some, triggered by sounds, by sights, by smells. The present suddenly replaced by past, by memory so vivid it felt real, the veteran temporarily back in Vietnam, in the helicopter, in the door. The experience was terrifying, was disorienting, was beyond conscious control. The triggers learned eventually, avoided when possible. But avoidance meant restriction, meant limiting life to prevent psychological pain. The sound of helicopters was particular trigger. The rotor beat, distinctive, unique, heard years or decades later. The sound created immediate response. Physical, emotional, heart rate increased, breathing quickened, alertness spiked. The body remembering, responding as it had in Vietnam, as it had in the door. The response was automatic, unavoidable. The sound of helicopters meant danger, meant threat. The association was trained, was reinforced through hundreds of missions, couldn't be untrained easily. Some veterans sought out the sound, went to air shows, to military bases, to places where helicopters flew. The sound was triggering but also connecting, connected to the experience, to the crew, to the time when everything mattered intensely, when life had purpose, when identity was clear. The sound brought pain but also meaning. The relationship with it was complex, not simple avoidance, not simple embrace. Something between. Hypervigilance persisted, the constant alertness, the scanning for threats, the awareness of surroundings, useful in combat, problematic in civilian life. Veterans found themselves constantly checking, watching, assessing, doorways, windows, approaches. The behavior was automatic, exhausting, created anxiety, made relaxation difficult, made peace elusive. The mind trained for threat detection wouldn't stop detecting, wouldn't accept that threats were absent. Crowds were difficult, too much input, too many people, too many potential threats, too much unpredictability. Veterans avoided crowds when possible, felt uncomfortable in them when avoidance wasn't possible. The preference for space, for distance, for control, the need to see approaches, to have exits, to manage environment, all stemming from training, from experience, from survival instincts that remained active. Startle responses were pronounced, loud noises, sudden movements, unexpected events, all created immediate reaction, physical, instinctive, the veteran responding as if to threat, as if under fire. The response faded quickly, awareness returning, recognition that threat wasn't real, but the initial response couldn't be controlled, couldn't be prevented, was embarrassing sometimes, was distressing always. Sleep disturbances continued, difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep, the hypervigilance preventing full rest, the mind remaining partially alert, partially on watch, the body unable to fully relax, unable to feel safe enough to sleep deeply, the exhaustion accumulating, the toll of poor sleep compounding other symptoms, creating cycle that was hard to break. Relationships suffered, partners couldn't understand, the distance, the emotional unavailability, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the behaviors that didn't make sense in civilian context. The door gunner couldn't explain adequately. The experience resisted description. The gap in understanding created distance, created conflict. Some relationships survived, adapted, found ways to accommodate. Others didn't. Ended. the casualty of war arriving years after the war ended. Employment was challenging for some. The structure of civilian work, the routine, the lack of intensity. After Vietnam, after door gunning, after missions where life was at stake, civilian employment seemed trivial, meaningless, hard to care about, hard to engage with. Some veterans adapted, found careers, found purpose. Others struggled, changed jobs frequently, never settled. The search for meaning that matched combat meaning. Search that often failed. Substance use became problem for some. Alcohol dulled the symptoms, reduced anxiety, helped with sleep temporarily. The relief was real, the cost was high. Addiction developed, created new problems, compounded existing ones. The self-medication strategy that seemed to help actually harmed. But in the moment, in the night, the bottle offered relief that nothing else did. The choice made sense even as it caused damage. Some veterans found help eventually. Therapy, support groups, medication. The combination addressed symptoms. Improved function, allowed life to continue with less suffering. PTSD became recognized, understood better. Treatment improved. Veterans who had suffered for years found relief, found ways to manage, found paths forward. The damage couldn't be undone, but could be addressed, could be treated, could be lived with. Others never found help, struggled alone, suffered without support, without recognition, without treatment. The toll accumulated. Decades of symptoms, of sleep disturbance, of hypervigilance, of pain. The price of service paid long after service ended. The cost of door gunning extending far beyond 12 months in Vietnam. Extending through lifetime, through all the years that followed. The sound that followed wasn't just helicopters, was also the internal sound, the memories, the replaying of missions, of combat, of loss, the sound of voices, of crew members, of troops being transported, the sound of impacts, of fire, of everything that happened in that year. That 12 months, that experience that couldn't be left behind, that came home, that stayed, that followed. For door gunners who survived, the war didn't end in 1973. Didn't end when the tour completed. Didn't end when they came home. The war continued internally, psychologically, in sleep, in memories, in responses to stimuli, in the way life was lived, in the weight carried. The war became part of them, part of identity, part of existence. The door gunner experience defined not just 12 months, but decades that followed. The door gunner position still exists. Modern military helicopters carry crew-served weapons. Soldiers man them, sit in doorways or at firing ports, provide suppressive fire, protect aircraft. The fundamental concept unchanged, the tools evolved, the tactics refined, but the position recognizable. Descended from Vietnam, from the door gunners who learned by doing, who created the role through necessity. The improvements are significant. Better weapons, the M240 replacing the M60 in many applications, more reliable, more effective. Better mounts, powered systems, improved traverse and elevation, computer-aided targeting, night vision, thermal imaging, all tools that Vietnam door gunners lacked. All improvements learned from their experience, from their losses, from the casualties that taught hard lessons. Protection improved, better body armor, ceramic plates that actually stop rounds, helmet systems that protect better, aircraft armor, ballistic protection around crew positions, around critical systems. The vulnerability that killed door gunners in Vietnam addressed, not eliminated, never eliminated, but reduced, made better, made more survivable. Training is formalized. Schools teach door gunnery, formal curriculum, standardized. New door gunners receive weeks of instruction before deploying, learn weapons, learn tactics, learn threat recognition, learn everything that Vietnam door gunners learned through experience, through survival or casualty. The knowledge now taught rather than discovered, the cost lower, the effectiveness higher. But the fundamentals remain. The door gunner sits exposed, watches for threats, engages targets, protects aircraft, protects crew, protects mission, the role unchanged at core. The risk remains. Modern door gunners face similar threats, different specifics, different weapons, different enemies, but similar danger, similar requirement for courage, similar acceptance of risk. The lessons from Vietnam shaped how modern door gunners operate. The tactics learned, the procedures developed, the understanding of threats, all passed forward, all incorporated into doctrine, into training, into equipment design. The door gunners who served in Vietnam, who survived or who didn't, contributed to this. Their experience became knowledge, their casualties became lessons, their service became foundation, the Huey itself became icon, the UH-1, the helicopter of Vietnam. Museums display them, preserved, restored. The aircraft that carried door gunners through their tours, that brought troops to battle, that evacuated wounded, that defined the war's visual identity. The Huey is inseparable from Vietnam memory, from Vietnam history. The silhouette is recognizable, distinct, the profile familiar even to those who never served, never flew. The image used in films, in documentaries, in memorials. The Huey represents Vietnam, and the door gunner in the doorway represents the Huey. The two connected, inseparable. The image of soldier in, door. M60 pointed down, belt of ammunition visible. That image is Vietnam for many. The statistics remain stark. Nearly 5,000 helicopters lost, thousands of crew members killed, thousands wounded. The numbers reflecting the cost, the price paid. Door gunners were disproportionate share of casualties, the most exposed, the most vulnerable. The statistics bore this out. The numbers confirmed what everyone knew. Door gunner was dangerous, was among most dangerous, was position that killed. The men who served as door gunners were young. Teenagers mostly, 18, 19, 20. Boys becoming men in combat, in exposure to mortality, in the crucible of war. The youth makes the service more remarkable. The courage required greater, the sacrifice more profound. Not professional soldiers with years of service, mostly draftees or young volunteers, doing job that needed doing, accepting risks because someone had to. The courage was sustained, not single moment of bravery, but hundreds of moments, hundreds of missions. Every flight was risk. Every approach to LZ was vulnerability. Every mission required strapping in, taking position, facing threats. The courage to do this repeatedly, day after day, mission after mission, for 12 months. That sustained courage over time. That was the door gunner experience. The cost was high. Physical casualties, hearing loss, wounds, deaths, but also psychological cost, PTSD, trauma, symptoms that lasted decades, that affected rest of life. The price paid for service extending far beyond the 12 months, extending through lifetime, through relationships, through health, through all the years that followed. The memory deserves preservation, not glorification, not romanticism, but recognition, acknowledgement, understanding. The door gunners served, faced extreme danger. Many died, many were wounded. All carried the experience forward, the memory of what they did, what they survived, what they lost. That memory is part of American military history, part of Vietnam War history, part of the story that should be told. The memorials exist. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, the wall with names. Door gunners are among those names, remembered with all who served, all who died. The specific role not always noted, but the service acknowledged. The sacrifice recognized, the name preserved. Local memorials exist throughout the country, cities, towns, parks, buildings, honoring local veterans, local door gunners among them, the community-level recognition, the acknowledgement from those who knew them, who remember them, who honor their service. Reunions continue. Helicopter units, aviation units, veterans gathering, sharing memories, sharing stories, processing experiences together. The bonds formed in Vietnam maintained across decades, across distance, the shared experience creating community, creating connection, creating understanding that civilians lack, that only other door gunners fully comprehend. Their stories are told by veterans when they choose to share, by families who preserve memory, by historians who document, by educators who teach. The stories of specific missions, specific men, specific experiences, the details that make the statistics human, that make the numbers into people, that make the history personal. What remains is complex. The aircraft, the position, the tactics, the memories, the scars, the statistics, the names, the stories, all part of the door gunner legacy, all part of what Vietnam was, what the helicopter war meant, what sitting in that open door required. The position demanded everything: courage, vigilance, skill, endurance, acceptance of risk that logic said was unacceptable. But war isn't logical. Combat isn't reasonable. The door gunner position existed because missions required it, because helicopters needed protection, because someone had to sit in that door. Someone had to face those threats. Someone had to accept that vulnerability. The men who did this deserve recognition, not pity, not sentiment, just recognition. They served, they fought, many died, many were wounded, all were changed. The door gunner experience marked them permanently, shaped their lives, determined their futures in ways they couldn't have anticipated when they first strapped into that harness, when they first took position at that M60, when they first looked down at jungle 100 feet below. What remains is memory, is history, is the knowledge of what was required, what was given, what was sacrificed. The door gunners of Vietnam flew missions that needed flying, protected helicopters that needed protection, served when called, fought when required, died when statistics found them, survived when luck held. All of them, survivors and casualties, are part of the story, part of the history, part of what should be remembered about Vietnam, about helicopter warfare, about what it meant to fight from the most dangerous seat in the sky. Not all door gunners completed their tours. The statistics made this clear from the beginning. The casualty rates meant that many who began as door gunners didn't finish. Some were wounded and evacuated, others rotated to different positions, and some died. The position's danger was not theoretical, was not exaggerated, was real, measured in names, in lives, in families notified. The death of a door gunner affected the crew immediately and profoundly. These were not distant casualties, not statistics, not names in reports. These were crew members, people you flew with daily, trusted completely, depended on. The door gunner sitting across the cargo bay, the one who checked his weapon the same way you checked yours, who scanned his sector while you scanned yours, who understood without words what the position required. When a door gunner was killed, the crew knew instantly. The sound of the impact, the way he fell, the blood, the immediate recognition that the wound was fatal, or the silence over the intercom when he should have responded, the absence where presence had been moments before. The knowledge arrived without announcement, without confirmation needed. You knew. The mission continued, had to continue. The helicopter was airborne, perhaps approaching an LZ, perhaps departing one, perhaps under fire. The mission didn't stop for casualties, couldn't stop. The pilots flew. The surviving door gunner maintained his weapon, continued firing if contact was ongoing. The crew chief might move to the fallen gunner's position, take over the weapon, continue the mission, everyone doing their job despite the loss, despite the grief, despite everything. The immediate response was professional, Training took over. Keep the aircraft flying, keep the weapons firing, complete the mission, get back to base. The emotions were suppressed, pushed down, dealt with later. In the moment, there was only the mission, only the immediate requirements, only survival. The return to base brought the reality fully. The helicopter landing, shut down, the crew having to deal with the body, having to remove their crew member, their friend. The medics would come, would confirm death, would take over, but first, the crew dealt with it. Unbuckled the harness, moved the body, the weight of a human body, the finality of death, all immediate, all real. The notification process began. Command was informed. Paperwork started. The militaries need to document, to record, to account for casualties. The dead door gunner became casualty report, became statistic, became name on a list. The process was necessary, was respectful in its way, but reduced person to paperwork, life to forms, service to data. The personal effects were gathered, the footlocker, the letters, the photos, the small items that made the corner of barracks or tent personal. Someone packed these, usually the crew chief or another crew member. The task was painful, intimate, going through another person's belongings, preparing them for shipment home, to family who didn't know yet, who were about to receive the worst news. The family notification happened through official channels, chaplains, officers. The knock on the door, the words that shattered families. Your son, your husband, your father, was killed in action. The details minimal at first. More information would come, but the essential fact delivered immediately. He wasn't coming home. The tour wouldn't be completed. The survival hoped for didn't happen. The funeral would be held. Sometimes in Vietnam, quick ceremony, military honors, taps played, then burial or preparation for shipment home. Other times, the body was sent home immediately. Funeral held stateside, family present, community present, the door gunner laid to rest, the military honors rendered, the flag folded, presented to family, the ritual acknowledging service, acknowledging sacrifice. For the crew that remained, the loss was processed slowly, the immediate shock, the mission mind that pushed emotion aside. That ended when they had time to think, to feel, to acknowledge. The grief came then, in the barracks at night, during quiet moments, when they had space to remember, to mourn the loss of crew member, of friend, of the person who sat in the other door. The replacement arrived. Another door gunner. Orders to the unit. Assignment to the aircraft. Taking the position of the one killed. The new gunner often didn't know, wasn't told explicitly, just assigned to crew, to aircraft, learning later, if at all, that he was replacement for casualty, that the position was open because someone died in it. The crew's relationship with the replacement was complicated, need for crew member, need to continue operations, but also the memory of the one lost, the comparison, conscious or not. The new gunner wasn't the old one, flew differently, acted differently, was different person. The crew needed time to trust again, to bond again, to accept the new gunner as crew member rather than replacement. Some aircraft had multiple door gunner casualties. The position cursed, it seemed. One killed, then replacement wounded, then another killed. The aircraft itself became known, avoided if possible, requested for transfer away from. The superstition was irrational. Aircraft didn't cause casualties. Tactics did. Enemy fire did. Probability did. But the pattern created belief, created fear, created reputation. The casualties accumulated across the unit, across the war. One door gunner killed this month, 2 the next. The memorial services became routine. The loss constant, the grief layered, compounding, each new casualty adding to the weight, to the understanding of cost, to the recognition that this was the reality of the position, that death was not exceptional, was common, was expected. The names were remembered by crew members who survived, the door gunners who didn't make it, remembered in conversations, in stories told, in the way veterans would gather years later and speak of those who didn't come home. The memory kept alive by those who flew with them, who knew them, who survived when they didn't. Some casualties were circumstances that felt especially cruel. The door gunner hit on his first mission, never had chance to learn, to develop skill, to survive through experience. Just bad luck, wrong place, wrong time, one mission and done, the waste of it evident, the unfairness obvious. But war wasn't fair. The enemy didn't care about tour length, about experience, about anything except the target. Others died near end of tours, the short-timers who almost made it. 2 weeks left, 1 week, days, then hit. Killed when survival seemed certain, when going home was close. The timing made it worse, somehow. More tragic, though all combat death was tragic. The proximity to survival just made it more evident, more cruel. Some died saving others, drawing fire away from damaged aircraft, providing covering fire while troops extracted under contact, staying on the gun while wounded, maintaining fire until loss of consciousness, until death. The heroism was real, was recognized. Medals were awarded, bronze stars, silver stars, sometimes posthumously, the recognition of courage, of sacrifice, of what they did in final moments. The families carried the loss forward, parents who buried children, widows who raised children alone, children who grew up without fathers, siblings who lost brothers. The door gunner's death created casualties beyond himself, created grief that extended through family, through community, through everyone connected to him, the ripples of loss spreading outward, lasting for generations. The memorials record the names, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the wall, names of door gunners among 58,000, specific panels, specific lines, the names etched in stone, permanent, accessible, visited by family, by veterans, by those who want to remember, to acknowledge, to honor. The door gunners who didn't make it are there, remembered with all who served, all who died. Unit memorials exist, plaques, monuments, listing casualties from specific aviation units, specific helicopter companies, the door gunners killed while serving with those units, the local recognition, the acknowledgement from those who served alongside, who knew them, who remember. Some door gunners have no known grave, were lost in circumstances where recovery wasn't possible. Aircraft shot down over hostile territory, crashes in remote areas, remains never found, never identified. These men are listed as missing, as unaccounted for. Their families never had closure, never had funeral, never had grave to visit, the loss incomplete, the grief unresolved. The ones who didn't make it deserve specific recognition, not just as casualties, not just as statistics, but as individuals, as door gunners who served, who faced the threats, who did the job, who died doing it. Their service was complete even though their tours weren't. Their sacrifice was total. Their contribution to the mission, to the crew, to the effort, all real, all significant, all worthy of remembrance. The door gunner position continued after their deaths. Others strapped into the harness, took the position, flew the missions. The role they filled was filled again. The aircraft continued flying. The missions continued executing. The war continued. But each door gunner who died was irreplaceable as individual, as person, as crew member. The position was filled. The person wasn't replaced, couldn't be replaced. The crew members who survived carried memory of those who didn't, carried it through rest of tour, carried it home, carried it through decades that followed. The door gunners they flew with, who died, who didn't make it home, remembered in quiet moments, in conversations with other veterans, in thoughts on significant dates, on anniversaries, the memory alive in those who survived, kept alive through remembering. What remains for those who didn't make it is the recognition they deserve, the acknowledgement of service, of sacrifice, of the position they held, the missions they flew, the danger they faced, the death they met. All part of the door gunner story, all part of Vietnam history, all part of what should be remembered, not forgotten, not reduced to statistics, but honored, respected, acknowledged as individuals who gave everything in service of mission, in service of crew, in service of country. The ones who didn't make it were door gunners. Sat in the open door, faced the threats, returned fire, protected aircraft, protected crew, did everything required of the position, did it until they couldn't, until the fire from below found them, until the statistics became personal, until their service ended not with rotation home but with death in combat. They were door gunners. They served. They died. They are remembered. The sound of rotor blades fades. The missions are history now, decades past. But the door gunners who flew them carry the experience still, some visibly, some invisibly, all permanently. The 12 months in Vietnam, the hundreds of missions, the constant exposure, the sustained fear, the witnessed loss, all of it remains. We remember not to glorify, not to celebrate war, but to understand, to recognize what was asked of these young men, what they gave, what it cost them. The door gunner position was necessary, was created by tactical requirements, was filled by soldiers who did their duty, who faced extreme danger, who survived or didn't, who came home changed or didn't come home at all. The statistics tell part of the story, the casualty rates, the helicopter losses, the numbers. But statistics don't capture experience, don't convey what it meant to sit in that door, to strap into that harness day after day, to watch jungle pass below while looking for threats, to return fire while exposed to everything, to live with the knowledge that probability was accumulating, that eventually, for many, the fire from below would find its target. The door gunners who survived carried memories forward, carried trauma, carried the sound of helicopters that never stopped, carried the weight of those who didn't survive, carried all of it into years and decades that followed. The war ended. The position was left behind, but the experience remained, became part of who they were, part of how they lived, part of what they carried. For those who didn't survive, the memory is held by others, by families, by crew members who flew with them, by the military that honors its dead, by the nation that sent them, the names on memorials, the stories told, the recognition that their service mattered, that their sacrifice wasn't forgotten, that the door gunner position, dangerous as it was filled by men who deserved to be remembered. The position continues. Modern door gunners fly, face different threats, use better equipment, benefit from lessons learned in Vietnam, from the experience of those who created the role, who defined it through service, through casualties, through survival. The legacy continues. The position evolves, but remains recognizable, remains necessary, remains dangerous. Rest now. Let these stories settle. The door gunners of Vietnam served with courage that endures in memory, with sacrifice that shaped history, with experience that defined them and defines how we understand that war. Their service was real. Their danger was extreme. Their contribution was significant, and their story deserves to be told. Quietly, carefully, with the respect they earned by strapping into that harness, by taking that position, by flying those missions, by being door gunners in Vietnam. The rotors are silent now, the missions are complete, the history remains, and with it, the recognition of what was asked, what was given, what was sacrificed. The door gunners flew, fought, survived, or fell, all of them part of the story. All of them remembered, all of them honored for service that required everything they had. Sleep well. The door gunners are at rest now. Their watch is ended, their missions complete, their story told.